Welcome to Storie van die Suburbs. I am Rian Pottas, a property practitioner in the northern suburbs of Cape Town. One of the best parts of my job is meeting the locals and listening to their stories. Follow us on our journey as we share some of these stories with you. In this episode, we speak to a local mountain bike skills coach, a forward-thinking website developer, and a dedicated and loving mother of 3 teenage boys. You'd be forgiven if you thought it was more than one guest, as it is only one. I'm privileged to call her my friend. I'm talking about Leigh Brookstein. Stay tuned as she tells us her Storie van die Suburb.
I'm a mom. I've got 3 boys. They're teenagers now. So prior to that, I worked for South Africa's largest media company. And pretty much my job was to go into a business and help them to market.
So in your mountain biking coaching, what are some key skills and techniques that you make sure you teach people quickly? And tell me, how would you say Durbanville's changed since you being the first residents in Sonstraal?
Reg so. Ek sal 7 uur daar wees. Ek gaan die koper saam met my bring. 100%. Sien daar. Dankie hoor. Tata. Hi, my naam is Rian Pottas. Ek is 'n agent by die nommer 1 eiendomsagentskap in die wêreld. Soek jy iemand wat jou eiendom in die kortste moontlike tyd teen die hoogste moontlike prys kan verkoop? Kontak my gerus deur die skakel onder die video en gebruik my wye netwerk tot jou guns.
Leigh,
Yes.
Thank you for coming today. It's really interesting. You're a friend of mine, I know you. And that is why we're here, because I find you an interesting character, a very, very knowledgeable character. And I think the viewers would really like hearing a bit about you today.
Oh, thanks, Rian. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Leigh, tell me, so give me a bit of history. Who are you? I know you, Leigh. Who are you?
I'm a mom. I've got 3 boys. They're teenagers now, and 19, 17, and 15. And that's also a lot of fun. I really enjoy being a mom of boys. That's pretty much me.
Yeah, you're a supermom.
Thanks. I don't always feel like a supermom, but I do try my best. I think that's the best we can do.
How often do you hear you're a supermom?
For some reason I do. I think my kids make a big difference in that because they're quite easy. I think I've got an easy run with them. So I think they make it easier to be perceived as a supermom. But I mean, as you know, my oldest Harrison is special needs, and I think learning to actually cope with having a child on the autism spectrum makes it a lot easier, because you learn a lot of skills to actually be able to teach him, and then that made it easier for the other 2, because a lot of the explaining and things that you have to do with a special needs person, it makes it a lot easier. Because you learn a lot of skills that you wouldn't necessarily have learned as a mom. So I think that also made it a lot easier. And I think that also helps with the coaching and explaining to clients. Like if clients can't always visualize what they want, I can often get information out of them because I've learned how to ask the right questions and things like that. So,
Leigh, so what do you do as a job?
So I'm very fortunate. About 6 years ago, I decided to go and start my own company. I saw a need. I was in marketing, and I saw a need for affordable hosting and website design, but also reliable. So I currently have a website design and digital marketing as well as hosting company. I do that full time. So it allows me a flexibility to actually, work from home and also, be there for my kids in the afternoons if I need to. And so I've been pretty lucky to actually work for myself.
For 6 years?
Yeah, 6 years pretty much. Yeah.
And prior to that?
So prior to that, I worked for South Africa's largest media company, and pretty much my job was to go into a business and help them to market. So I'd go and say, okay, this is what you do, and this is where you need to market, either Google Ads, social media. Print was still available there, like for example, Yellow Pages, and then this is what you should do and how you should actually position yourself, because at that time there were still businesses that could advertise in print, others not. And that was where I actually saw that there's a need for hosting and reliable hosting and web design, because basically all your marketing efforts come down to your website, and if your website's not up to scratch, then you can spend a fortune on marketing, but it's not going to work.
Leigh, so you touched earlier that you've learned to ask the right questions with your kids, and it made me wonder, how do you sit with a client and get his, oh, I want a website and I sell fish and I want my fish to sell the fastest. How do you get that idea practical? How do you get someone's random words about their ideas into practical application?
So to be honest, that's actually probably one of my biggest stumbling blocks, is actually getting the words from people. So when I sit with a client, I tend to take notes and I jot down key words because it's very important to get their passion across. Okay, like when you land on a site, the first thing you're asking yourself is, why should I buy from these people? Okay, and it's very important to get that across immediately. So if I can get that from the client in terms of, you can normally, by having a conversation, you can get that little bit of like his passion out of there and those key words, and then you can expand on that, and that can be in what we call the hero section, because you've got like 3 seconds, if that, to actually capture someone's attention. And constantly when people are on your site, they're thinking of objections like, why shouldn't I use these guys? Okay, so I try and get that information out. Like if somebody goes onto your website who sells fish, and I might be thinking, but is this fish fresh? Like, where does he get it from? You know, then overcome that objection in your site. Like, we only stock the freshest fish, we get it from here immediately, so that you're overcoming all those objections, right? And then it takes them on the user journey. Okay, so now we've established that these guys are credible. Let's carry on and what's the next step? So the next step would be either you place an order, or I phone you, or whichever is the step, or I'm going to buy directly online. So what the client wants is what we then direct. You know, if they don't want the online purchasing, we say, okay, well, how should they get in touch with you to make a sale as quick as possible? Because you need to do it as quick as possible, because you don't want someone's phone to ring, or the kids having an emergency and then they go away from your site, you know. Or you have your Facebook page, then they go to Facebook and then they end up watching reels and then they're off your site. So those are the things that you need to establish, is that user journey and the sales journey, so that it actually gives you a sale, because that's what the site is to make sales.
Yeah. I've never really asked you about the details of your job. This is the first time I've heard some things, and it leads me to the question, how do you stay updated? How do you make sure that you are aware of the latest in happenings, because you're on the forefront, you're in IT? How do you stay on the forefront?
So I spend time on social media, you know, obviously looking at the different trends and things. You've got to keep up to date with that. So to give you an example, like for example, when TikTok first came out, it was mostly kids on TikTok, but now a lot of businesses are seeing that that's actually viable to actually advertise. And you'd think like, but that's for kids. But it's the same thing that happened with Facebook. You know, it became the older people.
Can I interrupt you?
Yes.
Older people. My mom didn't see our previous episode. I phoned her, Mom, did you see the episode? Because I know she's mal with Facebook. Mom, did you see the episode? No, I'm only on TikTok now. I said, Ma, it's for kinders, it's for children.
Yeah.
No, when you sign up, they ask you if you're over 18. There's only adults on here. I was mind blown. But anyway,
yeah,
true
so
story.
That's the thing. You've got to keep in touch with who's on the different platforms, where they are, okay, so that you can look at your customer and say, okay, who's your target market? And then you put the advertising where the target market is. So it doesn't help to advertise on Facebook if your target market isn't really on Facebook, you know. And then obviously in terms of design, you need to see what are the latest font trends, because visual is obviously very important, the latest design trends. And then you need to keep up to date with, for example, like the latest PHP updates that are happening. That's on the server side. And then also the latest happenings within, I use WordPress predominantly. And then I use also Elementor Pro, which helps me to actually be able to not use a theme. I can just build from a blank page and actually put things in place how the client exactly wants it, which also means that updating and keeping it looking fresh is a lot easier. And they've recently, for example, put AI in, so you can create copy with AI and images, and which is pretty cool, because before, if I needed an image from a client and he didn't have one, I can actually now go to AI and say, okay, I need a picture of a man painting a industrial building, and it'll generate that for me.
And it'll have no copyright on it.
It'll have no copyright on it. So it means that we don't have to use stock images that have been
You've seen before,
overused, or you
potentially,
can
yeah.
see that it's a stock image. If you see, it's like you can actually describe the house. So you can say, like, I want a guy painting a very modern house or an olden times house, or so you can really
Original content.
yeah. We're busy with a website at the moment, which needs a lot of. It's actually a project that my son and I are working on, and we one of our stumbling blocks is we don't have recipe pictures, and then we actually just created them, and it's amazing how you can actually tell it exactly what to generate, and we don't actually have to take the photographs ourselves. So those sort of things, you've got to actually spend time learning how it works and playing around with different themes and plugins and see what's the latest things. And
Okay.
yeah.
Rad. Leigh, it's a bit tricky at the moment economically, and I'm sure a lot of us are looking at some side hustles. I'm sure you know the term side hustle. Have you got any side hustles besides web development?
Yes, so I actually do the mountain bike coaching as a side hustle. Funny enough, it just kind of happened. I didn't actually think of it as a side hustle. I was helping somebody with coaching, and then it just kind of spiraled, and then I needed a website as a portfolio, so I built a website. And obviously, because I'm good at SEO, it comes up first on a Google search for skills coaching, and I just basically got more business that way, and then it just developed. And so now through word of mouth and that, it actually it keeps me busy most afternoons or evenings, and
So in your mountain biking coaching, what are some key skills and techniques that you make sure you teach people quickly?
So with everybody, I basically go through the foundation skills, the basics, okay, even if they've been riding for years, because I find a lot of the guys that have been riding for years have maybe built a few bad habits. And obviously bikes have changed and geometry have changed, and if you've been riding a bike from the 90s, you'll know that the geometry is different to the bike now. And so I go through that with basically keeping your weight balanced over the bottom bracket, and your body positioning on the bike, and how to actually work your arms and the pumping. So I start basically getting the positioning right, and then making sure that they understand that you can be in a nice relaxed position, and then you can also get into a more like ready position, like attack position kind of thing. And but you don't want to go down an entire trail just in this attack position, because then you get tired. And I've seen people, like, I can always say, okay, you've been for coaching because you like driving down the trail like this, instead of actually knowing that it's a fluid motion. And that's why I work a lot on the pump track, because you've got to learn to actually work the bike and pump it. And so that I find is probably the biggest thing that and learning to put your weight down through that bottom bracket so that you're balanced and centered. And then once you've got that, everything else pretty much is easy to teach on top of those basic foundation skills.
What would you say are the hardest skills to teach riders?
I don't think there are really the hardest skills, because of the way I work it is we start with the basics. So if they're open to learning, I think the hardest thing is if somebody's not open to actually learning something new, then it's difficult. Especially, if someone's been riding for a long time and they have they're not open to actually learning something new, then that's the hardest. But mostly I find that as soon as they get that and it falls into place and they can feel, hang on, but this actually feels really good, then everything else on top of that is quite easy, because once you've got the positioning on the bike correct and you know how to put your weight down through the pedals, then everything comes naturally. I mean, I'll give you an example. I had a guy he phoned me up and he asked me, can I teach him how to jump? And I didn't realize when I spoke to him over the phone, but he was actually like 72 years old. So I said to him, yeah, come, we can give it a try. And so he said, should I take a 2.5 hour session or hour and a half session? And I said, well, let's book a 90-minute session and take it from there, and we can see. So we started on the grass, got his position ready. Okay, fine. Because he'd been riding for 8 years, he was already fit for riding. And then we moved over to the pump track, and then straight on to Durbanville, we did that small little table, and then I was like, okay, if you can jump that, you can do the gap jump. And within an hour and a half, he was jumping the gap jump on home run.
Wow.
So once you've got that, just to know where the basics is and how to move your arms and legs, everything kind of falls into place.
Yeah, you said something important, being open to learn.
That's the most important, I find, is just being open to learn.
No, we can do anything if we are open to it.
That's it,
So you've been mountain biking in Durbanville for a while?
Yeah, I got my first mountain bike in 1991.
Okay, and how has the mountain bike scene in Durbanville evolved over the last couple of years?
Well, geez, over the last couple of years, I think it's exploded. I mean, since after COVID. But I think it was growing steadily. I mean, when I first got my bike, I remember my friends were like, what is this? And, what are you riding? And I remember taking my bike to school for the first time, and like no one had seen a mountain bike. It was like, whoa, And then, I mean, there was Tigerbird Club, I think, started around then as well. But then we only really had the Magic Forest. And then over the years, we got more trails and everything. But I mean, the way it's exploded now, since after COVID, it's just been phenomenal. And it's actually pretty amazing, because it's also meant that more women are riding. And not only riding, but actually like more women are actually riding well and like doing like jumps and like the really cool stuff, which is cool. Before there was like a handful of girls and you knew everybody, and now like you'd be on the trails and you see like, hey, there's lots of girls jumping, and so that actually is really cool. I really...
No, that's right. I enjoyed watching the downhill over the weekend and seeing the amazing riders, female riders. They've evolved so much. Leigh, where did you grow up?
So I basically grew up in Durbanville. My dad bought a plot in Swanshaal in 82, and then we moved in. He built a house, so we moved in 1984. We were actually one of the first houses to go up in Swanshaal. So basically, from my house down to Fairtrees was just, they only had the roads in, but it was just fields. And I think that's where I learned to downhill. So my brother and I used to be barefoot on our bikes and like through the fields and. And then I went to Jean Lowe. We actually started at Jean Lowe the first year it started. And then I went to Fairmont after that, and so pretty much. Okay.
And tell me, how would you say Durbanville's changed since you being the first residents in Swanshaal?
So obviously there's been a lot of growth, and I mean Durbanville always was well established, but obviously I've watched the whole across the road from Fairtrees develop from farms to basically a whole residential area.
Swanshaal Heights is just on the other side.
So Swanshaal Heights, that used to be like, we used to go play in the river and swing like over the river, and like I remember in winter they used to always have hot air balloons going up from there on the farms, and from right
over there where Swanshaal Heights is?
From where Swanshaal Heights basically is,
How long ago was this?
So that was, we moved in 84, so that would have been between 84 and 88.
Okay.
I think when I was in high school, they started building, probably after the 90s, they started building the Swanshaal Heights.
Okay.
That was quite sad, but obviously it has to happen.
It has to develop,
we used to go and play in those fields on the farms, and the cows used to sometimes cross the road. And
wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I live in Goedemoed now, just around the corner from Swanshaal Heights, and I work in Swanshaal Heights quite a lot.
Okay.
As an agent. That is where I focus at the moment. There's a lot of activity in Swanshaal Heights. It's a great place to stay.
It's a really nice area, yeah.
Leigh, how do you experience Durbanville's community?
So I've always felt like Durbanville we always called it a village. Like if we were going to the city, you're going to Cape Town, like you're going to the city. But if we were going to go like down to Pick and Pay, we're going into the village. And that's how I've always felt about Durbanville, is like, even though it's massive now and there's so many things in Durbanville and like there's so many businesses and everything, it's still like a village. And in a village you tend to like know people, so you can go to the shop and you'll be greeting people in the shops. You will always run into somebody that you know. And then it is good for business, because if you're doing business for people that you know their business, so it's easier to actually work together, because and so I think it has got that aspect of looking out for one another. Your neighbors are still looking out for you, and so that's what I like about it. It's a really, really cool place.
A really, really cool place. I like that. So Leigh, how can we as the people of Durbanville improve this wonderful community?
So, to be honest, I think it's a pretty cool community as it is already. But I think in terms of if you want to do improvements, there's always obviously improvements that could be had. And I think there's a lot of people moving down from Joburg, and also people from other areas moving into Durbanville. And I think more community things, like I know there's the Durbanville Craft Market, which was always a nice thing to do, like on a Friday night, go to the Durbanville Craft Market. And so, I would say doing more community things is quite nice, and inviting people to actually get involved with the community so that they feel that community spirit, and actually start, like if someone moves down from Joburg, they might feel like a foreigner. And then maybe finding ways to actually get people more involved, so that you can have this community where people actually help each other out and stay within that community feeling, because
a nice
sometimes
market.
Yeah, I sometimes have felt that, if you go to Durbanville, it's not that small little community anymore. So any way that you could actually still bring that back, so you make people feel as if they're part of something, which will then mean that they will support local more, and not look out for, for example, people love to online shop, but maybe they can still support the local businesses instead. I think that's quite important. And if you have that village feel, people will do that more.
Leigh, now you've noticed we've got quite a couple of cameras here. Yeah. So that camera that's currently looking at me soon going to face you.
Okay.
And Jaco is now quickly going to plug the feed in that goes straight to Latuli House. So in a moment you're going to have the attention of government. You're just going to pop up on their screens now. Everybody in government's going to see you. It's now. What would you tell them?
Tell people in government?
They're watching.
I would say put all your money into educating the kids. Give them a better education as much as you can, because education means that they can, especially for entrepreneurs, and if they have better jobs, they feed the community or the economy. If we have more entrepreneurs, they feed the economy. And the more people that are actually contributing to the economy, the better it is.
Yeah.
For me, I also do some work for clients that are from developmental areas, and I help them out. I'll say to them, I can do a site for you, and because if I see they're starting out, and I've got 3 guys who I did sites for, and they've been with me for years, and to watch their businesses grow has been amazing. But that also helps my own kids, because they're building the economy. So if I help out people in that way, I'm actually building a better country for my kids.
Yes.
So it's not just about, I'm just going to help because you got to help, but you're actually building for everybody. And I think that starts with education, because if somebody's got a good education, they've got a way out of a bad situation. So I would say put your money into that.
So Angie Motseka, I think her name's Angie Motseka, or iets like that, but it's Angie.
Okay. Yeah.
She needs to pull her socks up, is what you're saying. Do a bit more education.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an economist or anything, but I would say
that'll work.
Anybody can do anything with a good education.
Okay, cool. So what Jaco's going to do now is he's going to change the wires. He's going to switch from Latuli House.
Okay.
And it switches straight to the O's over at the United Nations. Now you get to speak to world powers. Look them in the eye and tell them what they need to know.
The world powers? I would say basically try and get people to be kind and to learn about empathy, because that's the only way that we can actually save the world, is if people can put themselves in other people's shoes. So I think there's very little of that these days. So that to me is really important. Get people, do drives on that, teach kindness and empathy.
Preach. Thank you, Leigh. That's good. That's good. And Leigh, I must again say, you're a supermom. And you're a fantastic entrepreneur.
Thank you.
You're an example to myself, to your kids. And you keep it together very well. I've never seen you come undone. You always keep it together. Have you got a bit of advice that helps you stay together to share with the viewers?
To stay together? Yeah, because obviously, you can't be together all the time.
You seem together.
Well, okay, so I try to always look at the positives in a situation, because there's always 2 ways to look at it. So I can either be a victim and say, oh, this is a terrible situation, I can't get out of this, or I can say, how can I learn from this and actually improve on it, And so your situation's bad, but you can always find a good side of it, and I try to do that as best I can. And we've also, as an entrepreneur, there's been times where you don't always get your payments on time from clients and things like that, so you'll come to the mid-month and you'll be like, oh, geez, things are a bit tight now, or whatever, but just be positive and keep going, and everything's always worked out, even though sometimes I stress and that, it always works out if you just put in those hours, don't sit down and worry about it, get to work and actually working,
Stay
because
positive.
Something's going to happen if you're doing something about it. It's going to generate something. If you just sit down and be like, that's not generating anything. So rather actually say, okay, you know what, things are coming undone. What can I do? Work. Do something that can actually, and if that doesn't work, try something else. That's the same in business. I mean, if you think about people that are successful, they haven't just made it in their first business. They've tried a business and they failed, and they've tried and they failed. So keep going and don't care what people say. Like, just keep going, keep getting up, because you're not going to get anywhere from being on the ground. Just keep getting up and going.
Good work. Leigh, before we sign off, where can we find your two businesses you told us about today? Your website business and your coaching business. Where do we find
you? So you can look at designermite.co.za. So that's like designer and then mite. So it's like I put designer and dynamite together, which was the idea. Dynamite Designs.
Okay.
And and then the mountain biking is trailsavvy.co.za. Yeah.
Okay, designermite.co.za and trailsavvy.co.za.
That's it, yes.
I like it. Thank you, Leigh. It's been lekker. High five.
Thanks, Ryan.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yo.